This lesson is on apostrophes and quotation marks. Let's get started. All right, we're going to begin by looking at the definitions of quotation marks and apostrophes, and then after each punctuation mark, we're going to look at the rules. So we'll look at the rules for using quotation marks correctly and the rules for using apostrophes correctly. And we'll end, as always in this series, with a set of practice using apostrophes and quotation marks correctly in context. All right. What are quotation marks? Quotation marks are used to indicate that someone is speaking, either in dialogue, such as in a story, or in a quotation from an outside source. So, for example, the first sentence we have here may have come out of a story. "Hello, Bob," he said, and we have these two sets of double quotation marks. Now, when I say quotation marks in this lesson, I am pretty much always going to be referring to the double quotation marks. There is such a thing as single quotation marks, and I will talk about them, but when I say quotation marks, assume that I mean the double ones. And in our second sentence, Shakespeare tells us, "To thine own self be true." Well, Shakespeare probably didn't say that out loud unless he was playing Polonius in a production of Hamlet, but he wrote it down, so when we quote him, we put his quote in quotation marks. All right, here are the rules for using quotation marks correctly in your writing. First, when you are quoting within a quote, okay, so someone starts talking and then they quote someone else in the middle of their talking, use double quotation marks for the outside quote and single quotation marks for the inside quote, and keep alternating as necessary. Eventually you start to get double, single, and it gets really complicated, and at that point, just rewrite the sentence. But now, something you need to know about this custom. Some writing styles reverse it, especially in the British Commonwealth. So if you read books put out by British publishing houses, most standard dialogue will be in single quotes, and quotes within standard dialogue will be in double quotes, because life's just not hard enough in Britain. Now, periods and commas, just so you know. Periods and commas in the original always go inside quotation marks. So we look at that here. "Hello, Bob," he said. The comma at the end of the quote goes inside those double quotation marks. "She said," he said, "hello, Bob." So he said hello, Bob is everything that she said. Hello, Bob is what he said according to her. Confused yet? So you see we have the single quotation mark starting hello, Bob, and we have another single quotation mark ending hello, Bob, before we get the double quotation mark indicating the end of he said hello, Bob. Yes, that does mean that you have 3 quotation marks in a row. No, I don't think you get a prize for having a triple. All right, next set of rules. Place a question mark inside or outside of quotation marks as logic dictates. Basically, if the quote is a question, it goes inside. If the quote is not a question, but you're asking a question involving that quote, the question mark goes on the outside. We'll look at an example. Now, if a quote is part of a larger sentence, use only one ending punctuation mark. Now, we talked about this in our lesson on end punctuation. You can have periods, exclamation marks, and question marks. So, just so you know, question marks are stronger punctuation marks than exclamation points, and exclamation points are stronger marks than periods. So, she asked, "Is this seat taken?" She asked, comma, quote, "Is this seat taken?" Well, we're quoting her question, so the question mark is part of the quote, so it goes inside the quotation marks. But if you look at the second sentence, do you agree with the saying, "Absence makes the heart grow fonder"? Well, the quotation is just, "Absence makes the heart grow fonder." It's not a question. You're asking a question about it. So the question mark goes outside the quotation marks in this case. All right, when you have a question both inside and outside quoted material, you're asking a question about someone else's question, use one question mark, just one, and place it inside the quotation marks. Your reader will figure it out. It's okay, they're smart. You set off a quotation within a sentence with one or more commas. Now we're going to have an entire lesson on commas later in this series, and you can check that out there, but you'll see an example. Question marks may be used only to set off a direct quotation. So, did she say, "Is this seat taken?" Again, the question mark is part of her quote, so it goes inside. And we have that comma to separate "did she say" from "is this seat taken?" Now, here's the thing. Look at our second sentence. She asked whether this seat was taken. that sentence does not quote her in any way. It doesn't quote her words. What she actually said, we assume, was, is this seat taken? Whether this seat was taken is not what she said. So this is just a declarative sentence. It has no quotation marks because no one actually gets quoted. You're summarizing what she said. But if you look at the third version, she said, I like this seat, and sat down. She said, comma, I like this seat, comma, quotation marks, and sat down. So you set the quote off with this pair of commas here, the last of which goes inside the quotation marks because quotation marks like to have commas inside them, and the first of which goes outside the quotation marks because, well, for our purposes, just assume that open quotation marks, the first ones, don't like to have commas right after them. It just confuses everyone and looks really weird. All right, don't use quotation marks for quotations that are more than 3 lines long. Now, if you're writing something like a college paper and you're quoting a long passage from someone else's work, then there are special rules in your style guide for how to format those quotations. You set these quotations off in special paragraphs according to the style guide. Usually you move the margins over, sometimes you put them in a smaller font or smaller type size, but the important thing is those special block quotations, as they're called, don't get quotation marks unless there's a quote inside the quote. Yeah, more quotes within quotes. If you are quoting something that contains a spelling or grammatical error or is otherwise confusing, use seek in brackets to indicate that the error is in what you're quoting, not in your own writing. Basically, don't correct other people's spelling and grammar if you're quoting them. If you're quoting them, you're saying, this is exactly how this person said it. Bad grammar and all. So you put that little seek, which is short for a Latin phrase meaning essentially, I found it this way, don't look at me, Jack. And so you have something like this. Angrily, she typed, you're seek a terrible person. Well, this is the wrong you're. She's saying you are a terrible person to whomever she's addressing. And so she should have typed Y-O-U apostrophe R-E. Well, she got it wrong, but you are quoting her directly, so just to let people know that you don't have bad grammar, she does, you use sick. All right, now we come to apostrophes. Apostrophes are used to take the place of missing letters in contractions and to form possessives. So let's look at a few examples. He's a great soccer player. He's is short for he is, and the I is replaced with the apostrophe. Possessives also come into this. Why are you holding Steve's jacket? Steve apostrophe S is how we say the jacket belonging to Steve. Let's look at how these two work together in the same sentence. That's, that is. The dog's, belonging to the dog, favorite toy, you have, got in your hand. All right? So let's look at some of the specific rules for apostrophes. All right. When forming a contraction, which is where you stick 2 words together and leave some of the letters out, place an apostrophe wherever the missing letter or letters should go. So, for example, in he's a good soccer player, you took out the I and replaced it with an apostrophe. Double contractions, which means removing 2 sets of letters and using 2 apostrophes, are considered improper in formal writing. Although they do show up in informal text and dialogue, you will hear people say, you'd have done the same thing, which means you would have done the same thing. But if you write you'd have, you, apostrophe D, apostrophe VE, it just looks weird and very informal, and don't do it. So, examples. I'm not dead yet. I am not dead yet. You take out the A and you replace it with the apostrophe. They'll be arriving soon. They will. In this case, the apostrophe takes the place of 2 missing letters, W and I. He'd like you to meet his mother. Well, in this case, the apostrophe takes the place of W, O, U, and L. He would like you to meet his mother. She'd have loved to see you here today. She would have loved to see you here today. Again, the apostrophe takes the place of several letters. Now you notice we didn't write she'd have. We wrote she'd have because this is a more formal writing style. If we were writing dialogue in a story, or if you were, suppose, instant messaging somebody, you could get away with S-H-E apostrophe D apostrophe B-E, she'd have. And we say it all the time, but in formal writing, don't do it. All right, to show regular possession, ordinary possession, non-demonic? No, I'm kidding. To show the ordinary sort of possession, this individual owns this thing, place an apostrophe before an S after the name of the owner. Now, you run into trouble because some names end with S or an S sound, either S or Z. So, if you do that, use the second apostrophe and S if you can. It's not required, but it's preferred. So, Steve's jacket, Diego Velasquez's art, Elena's hair, Kansas's weather. Now, some people would write Kansas's, in the case of the weather, as K-A-N-S-A-S apostrophe, and they would leave off the final S. This is considered more informal than the way I've done it here with the apostrophe S, and I would encourage you to stick with the apostrophe S wherever reasonably possible. All right, to show plural possession, which means that more than one individual or more than one thing owns whatever you're talking about, make the noun plural first. Then use the apostrophe alone if the plural noun ends in S. If the plural does not end in S, use the full apostrophe S construction. So, the two boys' room. Well, there's two boys, so you take the singular noun boy and you make it plural as boys, and because it ends in S, you put an apostrophe after it. You see why I was concerned about Kansas? It's because some people treat Kansas like a plural. 3 cats' tails. Again, the plural of cat is cats, so you put the apostrophe after the S apostrophe. However, when you look at plurals that do not end in S, for example, 2 women's hats. Well, the plural of woman is women, but it doesn't end in S no matter how you look at it. So you just put the ordinary apostrophe S construction on the end. Similarly, 5 alumni's cars. I don't care what you've been told, alumni is a plural noun. The singular is alumnus, amusingly enough. So if you're talking about cars belonging to 5 previous graduates of your university, it's 5 alumni's cars. Use the apostrophe plus S construction where the noun that should follow is implied. So, for example, we say, this is Sharon's, not Sam's, hat. Well, we don't say, this is Sharon's hat, not Sam's hat, although that's perfectly grammatical. Frankly, sometimes in English we're lazy, and so we just say, this is Sharon's, not Sam's, hat. And they both modify hat, so you can use the apostrophe S construction just as you normally would for that situation. Don't use an apostrophe for the plural of a name. So, I visited my friends, the Sanchez's. Okay, apparently you're friends with a family named Sanchez. The plural is Sanchez's. You don't use an apostrophe just to form the plural. You just stick the ES on the end because the name ends in Z. Similarly, the Joneses are a lovely family. No need for an apostrophe because you're not forming a contraction or showing possession. The Stewarts have 3 dogs. Once again, we've come up with the plural of a name, but we don't need an apostrophe because there's no contraction and no possession. All right. With a singular compound noun, show possession with apostrophe S at the end of the word. My father-in-law's hat. So you wouldn't say my father's-in-law hat. You'd say my father-in-law's. Just stick the apostrophe S on the end. With a plural compound noun, form the plural first and then use the apostrophe. So, my sisters-in-law's home. Sisters-in-law means I have more than one sister-in-law. And apparently, in this case, they all own the home together. So it becomes my sister's, which is the plural, in-law's home. So the plural of sister-in-law is not sister-in-law's, it's sisters-in-law. So you stick the apostrophe S on the end of it because it doesn't end in an S. If 2 people own the same item, use apostrophe S after the second name only. If they own different items, use it after each. So the difference between Marcy and Laura's cat and Marcy's and Laura's cats is that, in the first case, Marcy and Laura own the cat together. The 2 of them jointly own the cat. There it's 2 people, I suppose. In the second sentence, Marcy has a cat and Laura has a cat, and the 2 cats are both being discussed at the same time. You might say, Marcy's and Laura's cats are both black. Marcy has a black cat, Laura has a black cat. We're talking about both cats, but each cat is owned separately, and so you say Marcy's and Laura's. All right. Never, 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 never use an apostrophe with a possessive pronoun. Check the lesson on pronouns in basic grammar if you're not clear on this. But if you were saying the dog is hers, you never need an apostrophe. You don't write H-E-R apostrophe S. No, 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 never, ever, ever do that. I will hunt you down. This car is theirs. Again, no apostrophe. You don't need one. Pronouns are their own set of rules. All right, this is one that will drive people on the internet absolutely crazy if you get it wrong, so here's how to get it right. It's, I-T apostrophe S, always means it is or it has. It is only a contraction. It's, without the apostrophe, is always the possessive form of it. Okay? Now, here's how I remember this. It's raining. It is raining. It's been quiet too long. It has been quiet too long. In both of those cases, it's is a contraction, so you use the apostrophe. But you look at the last sentence. The hamster loves its hamster ball. Well, this is the hamster ball belonging to the hamster, which would be described as an it, so it's belonging to it, so it's I-T-S, no apostrophe. Now, here's the sneaky trick I use to remember this. If you've ever seen a hamster ball, it's usually a clear plastic ball with holes in it in which you stick a hamster. The holes are relatively small. The hamster runs around inside the ball rolls around, and it can't get stuck under the sofa or whatever. But here's the thing. It's raining. If it is raining, rain may be falling from the sky, but very little of it will get inside the hamster ball. So just think of the apostrophe in it's raining as a raindrop. If you can say it's raining, short for it is raining, then you use the apostrophe because it's raining. But if the hamster loves its hamster ball, there's no rain inside a hamster ball, and so the possessive form does not get the raindrop, it does not get the apostrophe. And you wonder what grammarians think about all day. Okay, next rule. Plurals for capital letters and numbers used as nouns do not require apostrophes. So we say, I know my ABCs, which is the alphabet, and you don't use an apostrophe after the capital C, you just stick an S there. 3 of my uncles are MDs, medical doctors, no apostrophe. I was born in the 1990s, no apostrophe, even though we're using a number as a noun. You do use apostrophes with capital letters and numbers where the meaning would be unclear otherwise. So, for example, I have T's to cross and I's to dot. Well, you could just say TS for T's, there's no word, but if you say IS without the apostrophe, people think it's is, and they read the sentence as I have T's to cross and is to dot. Then they get confused and stop reading and possibly go somewhere to have a lie down. You don't want them to do that, so in this case, you use the apostrophe to prevent confusion. Similarly, I can't tell your 6s from your 0s. This means that the problem here is that the 0 looks a bit like a capital O, and you don't want them to say your 6s from your O's. You want them to look more closely at the 0 and see that it is a 0, so you use the apostrophe. All right, use the possessive case in front of a gerund, which is a verb ending in ing. So, I love Amber's singing. Okay? Amber is a person, she sings, I enjoy listening to her singing, so I use the apostrophe S. Now, the reason that this becomes important is because occasionally you use the ing form to refer to a general activity. And so, when you get pronouns involved, it gets a little bit wonky. The most common example is you will hear people say, if you don't mind me asking. Well, it should actually be, if you don't mind my asking, my act of asking. You wouldn't say, if you don't mind me dog, not unless you're a pirate. You say, if you don't mind my dog. So to keep that rule consistent, even when we're not using pronouns, we use the apostrophe S possessive case in front of a gerund. If the gerund has a pronoun in front of it, use the possessive form of that pronoun. So again, if you don't mind my asking, tell me who you are. I appreciate your assisting me with this flat tire. Remember, a gerund is a verb ending in ing that acts like a noun. So when in doubt, swap in a noun and see if the sentence still makes sense. You would say, I appreciate your help, not I appreciate you help. All right. Let's do a little practice with our quotation marks. Take a look at these sentences and see if you can figure out exactly where the quotation marks should go. You be warned, not all of these sentences will require quotation marks. All right. Hello, world, I announced. He said he's allergic to snakes. She said, you told me, wait here and I'll be right back. Do you believe the old saying, a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush? She asked, are you all right? But I didn't answer her. All right, take a good long look. Pause the video if you need to. You ready? Here we go. Hello, world, I announced, and you'll notice that the quotation marks are outside the exclamation point because what's being quoted is exclamatory. Hello, world. He said he's allergic to snakes. No quotation marks whatsoever because you'll notice the H in he's is not capitalized, which means we're not starting a new sentence. There was no comma after said, so we are not quoting anybody. We are summarizing what he said. So there's no quotation marks whatsoever. She said, you told me, wait here and I'll be right back. She said, you told me, open double quote, wait here, because we have a single quote when we're quoting within a quote, and I'll be right back. Well, that's the end of our single quote. And then we have the double quote to indicate that she's done talking. Do you believe the old saying, a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush? Again, we have the quotes, and actually this question mark should be outside these quotation marks because a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush is not actually a question. So the question mark should be outside the quotation marks. She asked, are you all right? But I didn't answer her. We have the quotation marks outside the question mark this time because she was asking a question. You had the inverted subject-verb order. So, she asked, are you all right? Hear that rising inflection? But I didn't answer her. All right, let's do a little apostrophe practice. See if you can figure out where the apostrophes go in these sentences. I don't think I can trust you. It's a beautiful day today. The dog chased its own tail. Are these Agnes's golf clubs? That's the girls' locker room over there. Terry's and Clark's backpacks are on the shelf. I consulted with 3 MDs yesterday. Mind your P's and Q's. And I love the Smiths' music. Take a good look. Pause the video if you need to. Ready? All right, I don't think I can trust you. Again, the apostrophe takes the place of the missing word O in do not. It's a beautiful day. It is a beautiful day. It's a contraction, so you use the apostrophe. But the dog chased its own tail. Well, the tail belongs to the dog, so you're showing possession. No rain inside the hamster ball, so no apostrophe. Are these Agnes's golf clubs? You have the apostrophe S to show possession, even though Agnes's name ends in S. That is the girls' locker room over there. Now, yeah, I took a little bit of a liberty in this sentence because in theory the locker room could belong to only one girl, in which case you would need apostrophe S, not S apostrophe. But in pretty much any place that has a locker room designated for females, it's designated for multiple females. So it's the girls' plural, S apostrophe, locker room. Terry's and Clark's backpacks are on the shelf. Terry apostrophe S and Clark apostrophe S. That indicates that Terry owns a backpack and Clark owns a backpack. They do not jointly own one or more backpacks. I consulted with 3 MDs yesterday. Remember, you don't need an apostrophe when you are using capital letters and numbers as nouns. Mind your P's and Q's. Again, we didn't need to add an apostrophe here because there's no word in English that goes psst or ks. And finally, I love the Smiths' music. Now, you might have had to Google to realize that the Smiths are a band, but the sentence should have told you that they are at least a group of musicians. It's plural, so you put an apostrophe after Smiths, after the S. And that's all for this lesson. Thank you for watching. Educator.com.